No, I'm not Jed. Sorry to let you down, but you get to hear me this morning. If you want to, I'd ask you to turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 16. I'm going to look at verses 1 and 2. So now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. For on the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. Now, each of you might be thinking right now, oh boy, we're going to get a lesson from an elder about giving. That's a little bit true, but not really, because I'd really like to look at a little bit different passage, look at this passage a little bit differently. Paul wrote, will there be no gatherings when I come? That denotes planning. It denotes action. It denotes forethought. Paul does lay out when we're to give. He lays out how we're to give. He says, as we've been prospered. And I didn't coordinate that with Ed, but I thought Ed said that very well. Are we giving as God has prospered us? It's not something that should be done at the last minute. Just as our giving should not be done at the last minute, we should plan how those funds can best be used and then take action on that plan. You can also turn over to Luke chapter 14, verses 28 through 31. He says, for which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh again with him with 20,000? Both of these passages that we've just talked about show that planning is essential. It is a godly thing. Planning to do God's work is most certainly should be thought out. And the elders have asked me to bring a lesson this morning that will convey to the congregation the plans, the goals, the ideas, and yes, the budget for this coming year. Over the last couple of months, the elders have met separately. We've also met with the deacons concerning the plans and the budget for 23. There were several meetings, several discussions, a lot of thought, a lot of text that went back and forth. And you can imagine there was a lot of time spent on it, and I'm not going to make you bear that. There's only about 12 slides, so it won't be that long. I've condensed it quite a bit. The agenda this year is one that I believe of challenges to meet the budget, but also of challenges that we must meet individually. And challenges have to be met, some of these, especially a budget, because we've made obligations. We have obligations to meet. And I would say the key thought that we want to convey this morning is participation. There are a number of ways and a number of areas that each of us can get involved and be more involved. The only way to get involved, though, is to understand what the plan is. You can't go play a game and not understand what the plan is, not know what the play is, and be successful. And so this morning, I hope that we'll set out those goals. Here again, not the least of which is the budget. And the budget is not some arbitrary number that we just came up with and said, that looks good. A lot of forethought went into everything that we could consider about the work of this congregation. Our first obstacle that we really believed we had to consider was the economic times that we're living today. We have some economic headwinds in front of us that we all know. Inflation is not a friend to us. It's not been a friend to the budget in 2022, and it's not been a friend to any of us over this past year. So that was the first thing we considered. Second, we considered that we wanted to put something forth to the congregation that was a challenge. Something that is attainable, but yet a challenge. Not something we can say, oh yeah, that's fine, we can make it. But something that makes each of us think and prepare and plan, to have a forethought. With those two criteria in mind, we resolved to set the budget this year at the same number as last year. Now you might say, well, how is that a stretch, Tom? It's a stretch because we understand the economic headwinds that are in front of each of us. Every one of us has a budget at our home, and we know that that's been stretched further. We know that costs are, and I'll guarantee you as we get into the budget and talk about what happened this past year, you'll understand that the budget here was stretched as well. As we worked through each of these categories, we took consideration of the goals that we wanted to meet outside of the budget, to highlight some of those things. So the budget is part of the goals, and really goals are part of the budget. They're kind of intertwined. I think we have to think about what was said in Luke chapter 2, verse 49, when Christ said, "How is it that you sought me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" Today, we're going to be about the business of the work of the Emporia Avenue congregation. I'd like you to think about Psalm 119, verse 105. It's one of my favorite passages. It says, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." And that's what I hope to do here today, because when it's a lamp unto your feet, you think about it, it's shining down where your feet are and says, this is where I am today. But it's also a light to my path. It means if that's my path, it can show me the way. And I hope that as we talk about this today, we'll be able to think about being a lamp and being a light. Where we are today, where the lamp is shining, is a very good place. A place this congregation has worked hard to reach over the past several years. I know in our conversations, I think Leroy was the one who said it most. He said, this is as good a year and as good a time as we've had in quite some time. And it isn't without effort on everybody's part. It isn't without effort from the elders' part that were before me. And every one of us should be thanked about where we stand today. This year we met the budget on contribution. Actually, we exceeded it just a little bit. That's a good thing. Leroy told me there are years that we've been looking for $30,000 at the end of the year. We're not there this year. And in the expense side of the budget, we spent just slightly less than what we budgeted for the year. That's a good thing too. So if you're a math guy, you think about it and say, well, we didn't spend as much as we thought and we took in more than we thought. That's a good thing, both of them. So we do believe that this goal, this budget will be good. We believe that it's attainable. We also, just as a side note, this is not part of our overall budget, but it's a work of the church. The Blanche Phillips Fund is being fully utilized this year. This past year, we actually spent a little bit more because we had some excess funds that hadn't been used, and so we expanded what we were doing. And this next year, we'll have 2 individuals that will be fully used in that fund. So first, I'd like to talk about some things that were, I missed that one. I apologize. See, I got myself lost. Some significant changes that happened this past year. First, the deacons had been very pointed with the elders of saying, we need to plan ahead because we've got some things in front of us that aren't right, and we think we'll have some savings. And the first one was they wanted us to look at the lease that we had on the printers. It was quite a big expense. And we looked at that, we got some quotes, and we made some changes this year, and it's been fully executed. But we basically own the printers that we have now, and we have a service agreement that'll keep us from having any exorbitant costs. And we think we're going to basically save a little bit over $4,000 by doing that. All of that was expensed in 2022, and so we're going to reap the benefits of that in 2023. Likewise, we had 3 staff changes. It's been a fun year being first year as an elder and having the staff changes that we've had. Leroy's back there grinning at me right now. Because one of the first meetings we had, Willie made sure that I understood that he was going to leave and retire. And I was like, oh boy, we get to replace Willie. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think we could have found a better man for the job. I've had a ton of comments from a lot of different people, and I know the other elders have, and I don't think we have an elders meeting that we aren't thankful that Jed accepted that position and that he's worked like he has. And we were able to take Jed from a position with the involvement and youth minister and move him up, and so we were able to increase the support for him. And he allowed us to do that at a level that gave us some comfort of what we were going to do next because we had to replace him. And so replacing Jed, we knew that we didn't want to come back with a full-time because we did not want to saddle the congregation that hard right now. We wanted to make sure that we had sufficient to do with what we needed to do. And we set our sights on somebody to do part-time. And we set our sights on the young man who just led us in singing. And he worked with us and we worked with him, and I think we are very happy that that's happened as well. I know Jed is happy with that because they work in concert together. And I know Jed has not been willing to just totally give up the youth group, and that's a good thing. I enjoy seeing him on the front row with the kids, and I'm certainly glad that he's working with the youth as well. And Brett's doing a wonderful job, and we thank him for his efforts. Those changes, as well as you know, that Vonda retired just like last Saturday night at about midnight. And so we had to replace her too. So we've had a fun time replacing people this year. But all of those changes together, the printer, the staff changes, all of those yielded considerable savings that we were able to make. And we're going to be able to employ those funds in other areas of our work here. And I think that's a great thing because I think you'll be excited about some of the changes that we're going to make. First things I'm going to do, I've basically broken down the budget into two items. They're not budget items per se, but I'm looking at the physical property side first, and then we're going to look at the evangelistic side, because I think those are two things where we can divide the work of what we do here. So first, there's some small changes that we've made, and obviously you're not going to change everything a lot. We're allowing basically for inflation in some areas. We're looking at advertising, fellowship, I'm on the wrong one. We're looking at property tax, technology, and transportation. Those three, no big changes to them. Nothing that's really big. Transportation, obviously with the vehicles, and also with the mileage allowance that we have for the minister. And then property taxes, we're allowing for them to go up some, but they're nothing major. And technology, we've got a lot of technological things here, whether it's a speaker system here or in the other room, computers, and anytime one of those goes out, it's probably going to be a minimum of a couple of $1,000s to replace. So we wanted to make sure that we allowed for that. And then you see the bottom one, and this is another place that the deacons have been really on point about making sure that we were taken care of, and the fact that we have some older air conditioning units here at the building. If you go outside and count, if I did it right and I had to actually take off a shoe to make sure I got there, I counted 11 different units sitting outside. And I think if what Roger told me, all of those are original from whenever that building was built, or at least they've got quite a bit of age on them. And so we've been setting aside a fund this past year to say if one goes out, we've got some money set back. And so we're going to do that this year, but we're also, as we look at some of the major changes with building and grounds, we're going to allow this year to basically replace one of the units. We weren't sure that we were going to be able to do that, but obviously with the changes we had, this is going to be one of our bigger changes. We're going to allow that. We think that's going to be potentially $10,000 to $15,000 to replace one, and we have 11. So think about that. The other change that we're going to make, obviously the general building expenses we have here. Brother Steve Lamb is over that as a deacon. He has done a wonderful job. He keeps an eye on a lot of different things here, and he keeps us out of trouble, if you will, because he sees the things before they're a big problem. And if you know it like I know it, that if you get it before it becomes a big problem, it's a whole lot easier to repair. And so he does that. He keeps his eyes on a lot of things and has a lot of people here that help him with that. And we're certainly appreciative of everybody that lends their skills to the work here, because that saves us from having to spend money on somebody who would have their skills outside of the congregation. But this is also an area that we want a little bit more participation from everybody. He schedules work days. I think it's the third Saturday, if I'm correct, but it's normally on the schedule. It's even in the fourth. Alan's going fourth, so it's fourth Saturday. To come up here on the building on a Saturday and work, just in the morning. And the more people that we have that'll come and do that, the more work that we can get done, and the quicker we can get done. And so it's a good time to fellowship with one another, but also to come and use the skills that we have here. And so that's something that we would like for all of us to put together and try to do more of working together. Another one is insurance. We spent about 20% more in 2022 than we did in what we had budgeted, and so we're going to allow for that, plus a little bit of inflation, about $16,000. We hope that includes buildings, that includes workman's comp, that includes the vehicles. So that's going to be an item that's going to increase this year. Office expenses. We've already talked about that a little bit. Basically, we with the printer buying and the service package, we know we're going to save some money, and so we're able to take that budget down. We're not taking it fully down by that full $4,000 because we're allowing for some additional expenses just because of inflation. So we're about $8,000 there. Utilities, that's a big number. That's a really big number. Inflation has not been kind to our utility expenses this past year. We budgeted for $16,000, which is not small in and of itself, and we ended up spending, because of increased cost, a little over $20,000. So we have to allow for something else because we don't see inflation ending, so we're budgeting $22,000. It's over 23% higher than last year. Hopefully the replacement of one AC unit will help, because that one will be more efficient than the one it replaces. But we've also tasked the deacons with going around and looking at everything that we do here and all that we have. I don't care if it's weather stripping or setting thermostats or whatever it is, and say, are there things that we're missing of being more energy efficient, trying to make sure we're saving every dollar we can, because that $22,000, that represents almost 9% of our budget. And I'm a numbers guy, and that bothers me. That's not anything that does anything for the work here besides keep us cold and keep us warm. That's all it does. And so we're hoping that we can change that and make some changes that will be able to cut into that, and hopefully maybe even some expenses will go down on us, but that's what we're allowing for. That finishes the physical side of the properties. And that represents 40% of our annual budget. There's two big things in there. There's utilities and that air conditioner expense. Otherwise, we would have that lower, and I would like to see that percentage lower. I'd like to see much more of our budget being spent on evangelism, but we're having to make some changes this year that keeps us out of trouble. So as we look at some of the evangelistic things, I'll look at some of the slightly changed items: advertising, fellowship, having a guest speaker, and youth activities. Now, the one that stands out to me on there of having a light change is youth activities, and that's simply for the fact that we don't want to shortchange anything we're doing with our youth. It's something that we are proud of. It's something that we think is being done very well by Brett, and we want to fully support that, because not only are they working with them and bringing them together, but they're also training them, helping them to become leaders that we'll have in the future. And I think that's extremely important for a congregation to have that, and it's extremely important for us to continue to support that. And I will give Jed some kudos here. He's probably saying, I wish he would be quiet. But this past year, I know we had a number of conversations while he was over the youth, and he was very, very, very much on point about how much money was being spent, trying to make sure that he wasn't overspending, trying to make sure that we were doing things that might allow us to save a little bit of money in the future. And we certainly appreciate those efforts, because we actually spent about 30% less than was budgeted last year, and we're thankful for that. So we're actually taking that number down just a little bit. It's only like $700, so don't get upset. It's just a small change. But we are fully supporting what goes on with our youth here, and happy for them, because I know every time that I've been back there with them, I'm always proud of the things that they're doing and working together. So that's the small changes. Now, how about the big changes? You might say education. Well, man, $4,000, that's not a big issue. Actually, that number is unchanged. But we obviously don't want to under budget education, because that's part of what we're here for, right? That's part of being able to evangelize, because as we're teaching, we have teachers that are set up to do that. That number is unchanged, but we're taking something out of that budget and putting it elsewhere. We've always had, in the past, the Ladies' Day expenses have been part of the education budget, and we're going to actually move that to evangelism. And so those dollars are going to stay there but be used for education. That covers our class materials for the youth. It covers class materials for the ladies' class, for the adult classes alike, anything that needs to be done. And I would urge our teachers to be thinking about things that need to be done. I know this past year we've started using some new material. That's maybe a little bit more costly, but also we want you to know that if there's something that you see that we need, whether it's a resource room or something else, we want to know about it, because we want to fully support what we're doing on the education side. That leads us into the it's another area here that we want to think about our participation. Parents, we need your participation to make sure that your child's here for every Bible class, because we have teachers that are preparing every Sunday, for every Sunday and for every Wednesday to teach our youth. Are you taking advantage of that? You should be. If you're missing out on a Bible class, whether it's your children or whether it's yourself, don't miss out. That's an opportunity to study God's Word and to learn more about it. Be here at every opportunity you have. There's no excuse for not being here, not one. And it's here for the benefit of you and your children. And we have some very good teachers. We have some very dedicated teachers that love God's Word and they're willing to share it. There's a reason that Paul wrote in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, that we should not forsake the assembling of ourselves together. And they're going, oh, there he goes, counting on another one, beating us over the head. Well, I'm sorry, it's there. That's why he wants us together, so we can exhort one another, we can build one another up, and then we can come together and we can do what it says in Timothy, to study, to show ourselves approved unto God. Why do we not want to do that? You should want to do that at every opportunity. We also want more participation from the standpoint of needing teachers. You know, we've got some teachers that, and even some individuals that have told me, I don't know that I want to teach again because I got stuck in a class forever. We've kind of made a change this year, and we've had actually 5 new teachers step up, and I know there's a couple of more in the wings, and we're very thankful for that. And what we're doing is we're actually putting 2 teachers on a class, and we're saying, you have a backup. If you need to be gone, you have a backup when it's your turn. And guess what? The next quarter, you guys can switch. And so you're not in a class all the time. You're able to participate in another class. You're able to go to another class and learn. And we appreciate everything that our teachers have done. And this works, I think, well, and it helps others to step into a new class. So we ask you to look at what you can do and understand we're not going to stick you in a class forever. We're going to give you the opportunity to be in and then be back out. And we need dedicated class teachers. You know, in Acts chapter 8, verses 30 and 31, we're given an example of Philip and the eunuch. And it says, "And Philip ran thither to him and heard him read the prophet Isaiah and said, Understandest thou what thou readest? And he said, How can I, except some man should guide me?" That's a teacher. That's what teachers are to do, is to guide us in God's word. Godly Bible class teachers are needed and are the great pearl, if you will, of the church. Evangelism. In the past, this has been a budget item that really didn't have a lot of money in it because we broke it up into so many other different areas. This year, we're adding some money to evangelism, one, because of what we said with the Ladies' Day. We're adding the Ladies' Day to that category. We're budgeting $1,000 for the budget this year. And then we're also allocating an additional $3,000 just for the work around here, things that wanting people to understand that we want to do more. We don't know. We as the elders don't have all the answers. We're going to get ideas from you, right? We've actually even asked the deacons as well, because in the next one you see that next one down there. That's a big number. We're looking at missions. There's missions here. There's missions right here around this building. There are missions right here in this town. There are missions right here in this state. And there are certainly missions right here in this country. We don't think that any of this money, whether it's in evangelism, in that category, or mission work, and you can move those back and forth however you need, that can't be done within the borders of the United States. And we want to use those. Those changes that have been made are making these two numbers possible, allowing us to step out and to say, there's more evangelistic efforts that we can do. There's more things that we can take on. And, you know, right now we're starting to kind of, Loy is kind of starting a repository, if you will, of issues that we get asked to help with. We don't have a lot of them right now, but I guarantee you the more that somebody learns that we're setting a budget, that we can send some money out, we'll get a lot more. We expect to have more from each of you as well. We've asked the deacons, we asked Brett, we asked Jed in our last elders and deacons and preachers meetings. If you have things, bring them to us. We're going to have a lot of opportunities put before us. We're not going to say yes to all of them. We're going to say yes to some, and we're going to say no to some. Just realize that, because there's going to be a focus of where we want to do that. One other thing that we're doing on the mission side of the work is you guys might know about a guy by the name of Willie Hamblin. He used to stand up here on Sundays. We knew he wouldn't rest long, and he hasn't. He actually just recently has started another small work south of him, I believe. And he's asked the elders here to have the oversight of the funds that are being given to him for that work, because they can't fully support him. And we've agreed to do that. So we're already starting down that path. Most likely we will be a small supporter of that as well. We have not determined exactly what that's going to be, but that will be part of this mission work, supporting him and Betty in that work down there. So that's one of the things that we're already taking on. So like I said, we would ask you to help us with those things. If you see some opportunities, let us know, because we want to fully utilize the numbers that you see on the board. Another thing under evangelism is benevolence. Benevolence is not just dollars. Yeah, we put a number on the budget because we spend money on that, or we allocate money to that. And this year, that's about what we spent. And I would also tell you that we probably spent more than that, but a lot of that was members here supporting something else and adding some dollars behind the scenes that aren't even on the budget and never even see the budget. We have members here that help one another, that take each other to doctor's appointments or pick them up because they can't make it to services, or go over and help them at their house because they need repairs, or maybe they need their yard mowed, or whatever it happened to be. That's all benevolence, because if you look at Webster's dictionary, it says the disposition to do good. I like that. That was the very first one that came up. The disposition to do good. Isn't that what a Christian is supposed to be? Have the disposition to do good. You know, the second one is an act of kindness. It isn't until the third one, a generous gift, that you can even consider that as a monetary thing. And so benevolence is what we should be able to do, and we should be able to do it well. And so it's an item that's going to be fully funded no matter what has to happen. We don't know what that number it is. That might be double that by the end of the year. We don't know. But we stand ready. Roger Rankin does a wonderful job working with our benevolence. And I'll guarantee you, if you haven't been used and you want to be, you just let him know and you'll be used. I'll promise you. Because I've opened my mouth to him and he uses me. And I love it because that's what he's there to do. I love the work that he does, the fact that when we see legitimate help, we're going to do it. You know, last Sunday, Jed preached on Ruth and Naomi. There was an article in the bulletin that coincided with that. I don't know if you caught it, and it was named, "We Need Each Other." I would like to quote the last paragraph that was in that article. It says, "Through Boaz, God took care of Elimelech's family. God has always been concerned for the welfare of his people. Are we aware of our responsibility to protect the poor and oppressed? Genuine concern for others may require sacrifice. Christian, are you up for the task?" If that's not benevolence, I don't know what is. Are you ready to be Boaz for somebody? Are you ready to step up and help somebody? To the family here that meets together, certainly. To people outside of this congregation, yes. That's what we're here to help and to do. Acts of kindness are the best way that I know of to let others know that we are Christians and that we are working to please God in everything that we do. Now, all of those things that we just talked about, that completes the budget. $4,808 a week is what we need to average. If you look at the board that's over there behind the auditorium, sometimes it's higher than that, sometimes it's lower. But as I said, this past year we met it. We attained it. That's a good thing. We realize that there's going to be headwinds for different people. And it's not just that dollar number that you see in front of you. It's all of the other things that we've talked about. If we can't give financially, we can do other things. If we can't increase it, and I fully expect there are going to be people, if you were to all walk up to me afterwards and say, "Tom, I'm stretched as thin as I can be," that's fine. There are others of us that have the ability to do more. Whether it's physically, whether it's economically, or whether it's spiritually, we can all step up to a different part of that task. Because that's what we're talking about here. Not just a number, not just the dollars that were put in the collection plate just a few minutes ago. We're talking about the work of this church. How do we work together? How do we attain the higher position? The key word that I mentioned earlier was participation. Just to summarize some of the things that we've talked about, these are areas that the elders want us to see improvement as a congregation overall. We can't do every one of them, but we should be doing as many as we can. First one I mentioned, and I'm just taking them as they came through the lesson, is Bible class and devotionals. Parents, your participation and your child's participation is needed. It's wanted. It is desired. Because we're training song leaders, prayer, those that will lead prayer, those that would speak. And that's not just young men. There's young ladies that have come to me and said, "Hey, I want to be able to do this." We take them to LTC for a reason. That's not just to keep them busy. That's to help them learn what they need to do to learn about God's Word. This year, if I'm not mistaken, we're learning Matthew. Last year, it was Genesis. Interesting. Great studies. It's not lost on us what value that is to us as a congregation, but also to our kids. Attendance to worship. Some of you sitting here right now have already planned not to be here tonight. It's truth. It's a fact. Why not? Forget the fact that Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25 is still there. It hasn't moved. Why won't you be here? Do you not want to learn more about God? Do you not want to learn more about His Word? Do you want to take the opportunity to worship God? Another one. Wednesday night's the same thing. You need to participate. You need to be here. Do you want others to know that you place God above all other things in your life? Or is that afternoon football game going to keep you away from worship? Those afternoon family activities going to keep you away from worship. We have family activities here. It's called worship. It's called praising God. You need to be here. Education. We want better class attendance. Like I said earlier, our teachers are fully prepared. We have a great class of teachers out there. Parents, fathers, read Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. It says, "And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up" where? "In the nurture and the admonition of the Lord." It can't be done anywhere better than being part of the congregation and working with the congregation and being there when the doors are open. I know people that say, "I was taught to be there when the doors are open," but you're not now. Why not? What changed? Because I'll guarantee you, God didn't change. God's still there. God didn't move. You moved the goalpost. You're the one who's decided it's not important for me to be there anymore. I don't need to learn anymore. That's what you're saying when you're not at Bible class. That's what you're saying when you say, "I don't need to worship God another time." Why not? We should be worshiping God with every opportunity that we have. And you're provided a minimum of 3 each week. We want you to be here. The youth devotionals, VBS. VBS is already on the calendar. We're going to put it on the calendar early because we don't want anybody planning to be gone that week. You need to be here. Whether you're helping or whether you're helping kids learn or whether it's your kids that need to be here, that's what we're doing it for. Those things are set. Here again, all these things are intertwined, right? They're all together. It's not one versus the other. They're all together. And lastly, as we talked about benevolence, we need more families involved. And you know how many we need? Every one of us. We shouldn't stop until it's every one of us that are involved in benevolence. Do you have the disposition to do good? That's how benevolence was defined. Do you have the disposition to do good? I believe that today you've seen what the budget represents. It's not just a number on a board. It's just not just a number that's in the handouts that you have in your hand, because it's there every week. And over this next year, I want you, when you open that handout, look at that number. And I want you to ask yourself, am I doing all that I can? I want you to remember what we talked about here today. Am I attending? Am I worshiping? Am I teaching? Am I helping others? Am I having a disposition to do good? Because that's what we need to be doing as a church, as a family, and as individuals. Now, we still have to talk about finances because they're there, and we have our budget set. It's our budget. They're our goals to attain. It will take work. It will take effort of every individual and every family. There's something every one of us can do, and I'm asking you today, what are you doing? What more can you do to meet the challenges and the goals here? We need to stop and think about those goals. Every time you see that number in the bulletin, remember, am I doing all that I can? We, the elders, have now set the goals for us as a congregation, and the things that we're going to strive to be doing, because we know there's work for us as well. We're not immune. We believe that we have a set path, and we believe that we have to do our part, not just to meet these goals, but to exceed them. Now, this might not be a sermon that would convince somebody that need to be baptized. It might not be a sermon that convinces you that, there are some things that in my life that aren't right. But we always offer the opportunity for a baptism, for somebody to come forward and put on their Lord in baptism, for somebody to say, I've wronged God. I've gone against God's will. So right now, as we stand and sing, come, if you need our assistance.